The crimson sands of the Zalarian Colosseum stretched endlessly beneath a purple sky, where three moons hung like unblinking eyes. In the center of the massive amphitheater, four mechanical chains gleamed wickedly in the alien sunlight, each one attached to a different wall. They were preparing for a quartering. Ethan pressed his face against the cold metal bars of his holding cell, watching in horror as guards in elaborate ceremonial armor dragged a young woman to the center of the arena. Her skin had an otherworldly luminescence, shifting between silver and gold, like liquid metal, and her long hair cascaded in waves of deep blue. Even from this distance, he could see the defiance burning in her violet eyes. He'd been a prisoner here for 2 years, forced to work in the mines beneath the Colosseum. The Zalarian Empire had captured him during their latest expansion into human space, and, like thousands of other humans, he'd become nothing more than a slave laborer. But this was different. They'd brought him topside today along with other prisoners to witness this execution. It was meant to be a lesson, they said, a demonstration of what happened to those who defied the Empire. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, speaking in the guttural language of the Zalarians. Ethan had learned enough over the past 2 years to understand the basics. The woman was Princess Allura of the Viridian system, captured after leading a rebellion against the Empire's expansion into her territory. She was to be made an example of. 4 massive creatures moved toward the chains, their scales rippling with bioluminescent patterns. Each beast was the size of a small transport ship, bred specifically for executions. They would each take one of Allura's limbs and tear her apart slowly for the entertainment of the crowd. Allura stood straight despite the chains binding her wrists. Her chin raised in a gesture that reminded Ethan of ancient Earth nobility. She spoke, her voice carrying across the arena with surprising strength. The crowd fell silent, listening to words that Ethan couldn't fully understand but felt in his core. A guard struck her across the face with the back of his hand, and she stumbled but didn't fall. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, the same crimson as human blood. The sight stirred something in Ethan he thought had died during his years of captivity. The first creature began moving toward her, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of crystalline teeth. Time seemed to slow as Ethan watched the chains being attached to her limbs. In minutes, she would be torn apart. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed the ceremonial keychain from the guard who had been distracted by the spectacle. These keys opened all the cells in this section, a design flaw the Zalarians never imagined anyone would be bold enough to exploit. He quietly unlocked his cell door and then those of the prisoners beside him. "When I give the signal," he whispered to the human nearest him. A woman named Sarah, who'd been captured 6 months ago, run for the armory. There's a weapons cache 2 levels down behind the food preparation area. "You're insane," she hissed back. "They'll kill us all." "We're already dead," Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving Allura. "The only question is whether we go out as slaves or as fighters." The ceremonial drums began their death rhythm. The first creature lunged forward, its massive jaw aimed at Allura's arm. That's when Ethan made his move. He sprinted from his cell, using a broken pipe he'd concealed earlier as a weapon. The nearest guard turned just in time to take the makeshift club across his skull. Ethan grabbed the guard's energy rifle and fired into the control panel that operated the arena's main systems. Sparks flew, and the mechanical chains suddenly went slack. Allura dropped to the ground, rolling away from the nearest creature. Deadly chaos erupted throughout the arena. Guards shouted orders in their alien tongue, while spectators screamed and scrambled for the exits. Ethan vaulted over the barrier separating the prisoner area from the arena floor. "This way!" he shouted to Allura, extending his hand. She hesitated for just a moment, her violet eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. Then she grasped his hand, and together they ran. More guards poured into the arena, their weapons charging with high-pitched whines. Ethan ducked behind fallen debris, pulling Allura with him, as energy blasts scorched the air where they'd been standing. "The service tunnels," he said, pointing to a grate near the arena wall. "They lead to the lower levels." "You're human," she said, and it wasn't a question. Her voice had an unusual quality, like music made of crystallized light. "Last I checked," he replied, kicking open the grate. "We can discuss species identification later if we survive the next few minutes." They dropped into the tunnel just as an explosion rocked the area above them. The other prisoners Ethan had freed were causing their own chaos, some heading for the armory as planned, others simply running in blind panic. The tunnel was cramped and dark, filled with the mechanical hum of the arena's support systems. Ethan led the way, following passages he'd memorized during his time working maintenance details. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. "There's a transport hangar 3 levels down," he explained as they crawled through a particularly narrow section. "If we can reach it." "Why?" Allura interrupted. "Why? Save me, I'm your enemy. My people and yours have been at war for centuries." Ethan paused, considering her question. Through the metal grating above them, he could hear boots pounding and voices shouting orders. "Maybe because I believe some things transcend war," he said finally. "Or maybe I just couldn't watch them tear apart someone who showed that much courage." They emerged into a wider maintenance corridor. Allura studied him with those penetrating violet eyes. "You know they'll torture you for this. Zalarian interrogation techniques make human methods look like gentle persuasion." "I know," he said simply. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My name is Allura Viridian, Crown Princess of the Viridian Confederation and Admiral of the Third Fleet. Ethan Myers, former corporal in the Terran Defense Force, currently unpaid intern in Zalarian Hospitality Management." That earned him something that might have been a smile. "Your humor is unexpected." An alarm klaxon began wailing overhead, its pitch designed to be uncomfortable for most sentient species. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an ominous glow. "They've initiated full lockdown," Allura said. "We have perhaps 20 minutes before they flood this entire section with Somnifex gas." "What's Somnifex gas?" "You don't want to know, but it will render us unconscious within seconds of exposure." They reached an intersection where multiple corridors converged. Ethan consulted his mental map of the facility. "Transport hangar is that way." He pointed left, "But there's probably a full guard detail waiting." "Weapons cache?" Allura asked. "Emergency armory is down this corridor, but I don't know the combination." Allura held up her hand, revealing a complex tattoo that seemed to shift and move across her palm. "Viridian royalty has certain abilities when it comes to technology. Lead the way." They moved swiftly through the corridors, pausing frequently to hide from patrol units. Twice they had to press themselves into alcoves, whereas groups of heavily armed guards rushed past. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to move independently of their bodies. The armory was a reinforced chamber, protected by both a traditional lock and some kind of energy field. Allura placed her tattooed hand against the lock mechanism, and Ethan watched in fascination as patterns of light flowed from her palm into the device. "Biocompatible quantum encryption," she explained, noticing his stare. "Each member of the royal family has a unique neurological signature that can interface with certain technologies." The lock clicked open. The energy field shimmered and disappeared. Inside the armory, they found a treasure trove of weapons and equipment. Ethan grabbed a military-grade energy rifle and several power cells, while Allura selected what looked like a small handheld device covered in crystalline projections. "Sonic disruptor," she explained when she caught his questioning look. "More effective than conventional weapons against Solarian armor." They also grabbed body armor, portable shields, and emergency supplies. As they prepared to leave, Allura suddenly grabbed Ethan's arm. "Wait," she said. "Do you know what they were planning to do after the quartering?" "No idea. I was just trying to get us out alive." "They weren't planning to execute me as a simple show of force," she said slowly. This was part of something larger. The Emperor himself ordered my capture, not just for rebellion, but because I possess something he needs. What kind of something? Before she could answer, the corridor outside erupted with energy weapons fire. Voices shouted in multiple languages as humans fled and Zalarians pursued. Other prisoners, Ethan realized. We need to help them. Ethan, Allura said firmly, I appreciate your courage, but we can't save everyone. The information I carry is too important. What information? The location of Sanctuary. The word meant nothing to Ethan, but her tone suggested it should. Before he could ask for clarification, an explosion shook the entire level. Lights flickered and the sound of tearing metal echoed through the corridors. The main guard, Sarah and the others must have breached the upper levels. Ethan said, This is our chance. They shot through the doorway into chaos. The corridor was filled with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt electronics. Bodies lay scattered on the floor, some human, some Zalarian. A handful of escaped prisoners fought desperately against superior numbers and firepower. Ethan and Allura joined the Satuise without hesitation. The sonic disruptor lived up to its promise, sending Zalarian guards flying backward as their armor cracked and sparked. Ethan's rifle punched through their shields with surprising effectiveness. He spotted Sarah pressed against a wall, her makeshift weapon nearly depleted. A massive Zalarian in heavy assault armor was advancing on her position, his weapon charging for a killing shot. Ethan sprinted across the corridor, sliding under a burst of energy fire and coming up behind the alien. He jammed his rifle between the gaps in the creature's armor and fired. The Zalarian dropped his armor smoking. Thanks, Sarah gasped. But we're pinned down. There are too many of them. Not for long, Allura said, approaching them. She activated something on her sonic disruptor, and Ethan noticed the crystalline projections beginning to glow with increasing intensity. Take cover, she warned. They dove behind overturned equipment as Allura triggered the device. The result was unlike any weapon Ethan had seen. A wave of visible sound rippled through the corridor, distorting the air like heat shimmer. Where it touched the Zalarian guards, their weapons simply disintegrated. Their armor fell apart like sand. Many of them collapsed, their enhanced vocal cords unable to process the specific frequency. Viridian technology, she explained. We've been fighting the Zalarians longer than humans have known either species existed. The sudden silence felt surreal. Smoke drifted through the corridor like ghosts. Of the 20 humans who had been held in this section, only 8 remained alive. Transport hangar, Sarah said. There might be ships. No. Allura shook her head. The hangar will be heavily fortified by now, but I know another way off this station. She led them through a series of passages Ethan hadn't known existed. The air grew thicker and more humid as they descended. Eventually, they emerged into a vast chamber that hummed with energy. The station's power core, Allura explained. There are maintenance pods here that are used for external repairs. They're equipped with basic FTL drives. That's insane. One of the other prisoners, a man named James, protested. Those pods aren't designed for extended travel. They're designed to keep their occupants alive for up to 72 hours, Allura corrected, which is enough time to reach the closest Confederation outpost. Assuming it's still there, Sarah muttered. As they located the maintenance pods, Allura pulled Ethan aside. There's something you need to know about Sanctuary, she said quietly. It's not just a place, it's a weapon. A device left behind by an ancient civilization that supposedly has the power to end the war between our species. End it how? That's the part no one knows. Both humans and Viridians have been searching for it. The Zalarians believe that if they can find it first, they can use it to subjugate both our species permanently. And you know where it is? I know part of the location. My grandmother embedded the information in my genetic code before she died. It's why the Emperor wanted me alive. He needs my blood to decode the coordinates. Ethan stared at her. The scope of what she was telling him seemed unreal. So this isn't just about rescuing you. This is about the fate of 3 civilizations. Yes? An explosion somewhere above them sent vibrations through the power core chamber. Solarian reinforcements were clearly closing in. The pods? Allura said urgently. We have to go now. Each maintenance pod could hold 2 people. They divided into groups of 2, with Ethan and Allura in one pod, Sarah and James in another, and the remaining 4 prisoners paired off in the other 2 pods. The pods were cramped with 2 seats facing each other, and barely enough room to stand. Primitive control systems lined the walls. After securing themselves, Allura began programming their destination coordinates. Viridian Outpost Omega 7, she explained. It's only a day's travel at maximum FTL. What about the others? The humans? The pods have emergency medical stasis systems. If they go into hibernation immediately after launch, they can survive until we reach the outpost and contact human authorities to pick them up. The pod shuddered as its engines came online. Through the small viewport, Ethan could see the other pods beginning their launch sequences. Sarah waved from her pod, her face grim but determined. Here we go, Allura said, hitting the final launch control. The pod exploded out of the station like a bullet from a gun. The acceleration pressed them both back into their seats until the inertial dampeners kicked in. Through the viewport, the Zalarian station shrank rapidly, becoming a distant point of light. Only then did Ethan begin to process what had just happened. An hour ago, he'd been a powerless slave watching an execution. Now he was fleeing through space with an alien princess carrying information that could change the course of galactic history. My God, he breathed, we actually made it. Allura was busy studying the pod's systems. The FTL drive is charging, she reported. We should be ready to jump in 15 minutes. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The reality of what they'd left behind was sinking in. The other prisoners at the station would face terrible retribution. The guards they'd killed had families somewhere. I'm sorry, Allura said suddenly. If I hadn't been there, none of this would have happened. Those people would still be alive. If you hadn't been there, I'd still be a slave, Ethan replied. And you'd be dead. Sometimes the alternative to action is worse than action itself. She studied him again with those intense violet eyes. You're not what I expected of a human. What did you expect? The Confederation's intelligence files describe humans as aggressive, warlike, prone to violence and deception. We can be, Ethan admitted, just like any species. But we can also be better than our worst impulses. Isn't that what you did when you rebelled against us, the Empire? Or perhaps we're both more than our species' stereotypes. The FTL drive finished charging, and the pod's navigation system began its final calculations. Outside the viewport, stars began to shift and blur as the space around them distorted. Jumping in 3, 2, 1. Reality twisted. The stars became ribbons of light. Space itself seemed to invert. And for a moment, Ethan felt as if he existed in all places simultaneously. Then the sensation passed, and they were traveling through hyperspace. 18 hours to destination, Allura announced. The pod's designed for one-person trips, so we'll have to share everything. Food, water, space. I've had worse accommodations, Ethan said. Zalarian prison cells aren't exactly luxury hotels. As they settled in for the long journey, Allura began telling him more about Sanctuary. The ancient civilization that created it had been called the Architects, and they had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind only scattered ruins and artifacts. The Architects seemed to have the ability to manipulate reality itself, she explained. Their technology was so advanced it appeared magical to later species. Sanctuary is theorized to be their greatest creation, a device that can reshape matter and energy according to the user's will. That sounds impossibly powerful, which is why it's so dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could be used to subjugate every thinking being in the galaxy. Both the Confederation and Earth's government have spent billions searching for it. And now the Zolarians are close to finding it. Not just close. If they had managed to extract the genetic key from my blood, they would have had everything they needed. Your rescue bought us time, but not much. They'll eventually find other ways to decode the information. As day cycles passed in the cramped pod, Ethan and Allura grew closer. They shared stories of their worlds, their families, their hopes for the future. Ethan told her about Earth's oceans and mountains concepts, alien to someone who had grown up on worlds with minimal surface water. Allura described the crystal cities of the Viridian homeworld, where buildings grew like living things and transportation worked through harmonic resonance. They also talked about the war. Both species had losses to mourn, grievances to bear. But gradually through their conversations, they began to see each other not as enemies, but as individuals shaped by circumstances beyond their control. On the final day of travel, as they prepared to exit, hyperspace proximity alarms began blaring. The pod shuddered violently, and Allura quickly checked the navigation displays. "We're being pulled out of hyperspace," she said, her face pale. "There's a massive gravitic disturbance ahead." The stars snapped back into normal positions, and through the viewport they could see why. A massive fleet of ships hung in space directly in their path. But these weren't Zolarian vessels. "Those are Confederation ships," Allura said with relief. "A patrol fleet probably conducting exercises in this region." She activated the pod's communication systems and began transmitting on Confederation frequencies. Within minutes, they received a response, though Ethan couldn't understand the musical language of her people. "They're sending a shuttle to pick us up," she translated. "We're safe." But as the shuttle approached, Ethan noticed weapons powering up on several of the larger ships. Are they always this cautious? Allura frowned, checking her instruments again. "Those aren't standard patrol ships," she realized. "They're warships. This is a battle fleet, not an exercise group." The shuttle docked with their pod, and armed Viridian Marines boarded immediately. They spoke rapidly to Allura in their own language. Her face went from relief to concern to outright alarm. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "The war with Earth," she said. "It's escalated. 3 days ago, Zolarian forces attacked both human and Viridian systems simultaneously. My father believes Earth and the Confederation are responsible for each other's losses." "That's impossible. We were both fighting the Zolarians." "The Emperor is clever," she said bitterly. "He used ships captured from both our fleets to attack our own people. Now, humans and Viridians are at each other's throats, while the Empire prepares to clean up whatever's left." They were transported to the flagship, a massive vessel called the Star Symphony. Allura was rushed to a medical facility for observation, while Ethan was taken to a holding area. Despite Allura's protests that he had saved her life, the Viridians weren't ready to trust a human, especially not now. Hours passed. Ethan sat in a transparent cell, watching alien crew members go about their duties. Everything on the ship seemed to pulse gently with bioluminescent light. Even their detention facilities were eerily beautiful, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal. Finally, Allura appeared, flanked by several officers in elaborate uniforms. She looked exhausted but determined. "The Council has agreed to see us," she announced. "I've convinced them that the information about Sanctuary takes precedence over current hostilities." They were escorted through corridors that seemed to grow rather than being built. Bioluminescent panels in the walls pulsed in harmony with the ship's systems. The bridge was a vast chamber with a transparent dome showing the stars above. Control surfaces grew from the floor like organic mollusks, their operators interfacing with them through touch and harmonic vocalization. Admiral Threx, the fleet commander, was an impressive figure, even by Viridian standards. Her skin shifted between deep purple and silver, and her crest of sensory tendrils moved independently as she thought. She spoke to Allura in their musical language, then turned to address Ethan in accented but clear English. "The princess tells us you saved her life," she said. "This is unexpected from a human." Princess Allura is brave and honorable, Ethan replied carefully. I would have done the same for anyone showing such courage. You understand the larger situation we face, the war between your people and mine. I understand that the Zalarians are playing both sides against each other. That's what this information about Sanctuary is about, isn't it? They want us fighting each other while they search for this weapon. The Admiral's tendrils writhed in what Ethan was learning to recognize as surprise. You know of Sanctuary. Princess Allura explained during our journey. The Zalarians captured her to extract genetic information about its location, if they find it first. They will use it to enslave both our species, the Admiral finished. Yes, we are aware of this possibility. What we did not know was that the location data was encoded in the princess's blood. Allura stepped forward. Admiral, we need to reach Sanctuary before the Empire does, even if it means working with humans. The bridge fell silent except for the harmonic hum of the ship's systems. The Admiral's skin shifted to deeper purples as she considered. The Council has been in contact with your Earth Defense Force, she finally said to Ethan. They are also aware of the Sanctuary situation. There is a joint expedition being planned. You're going to work with humans? Ethan asked, surprised. The alternative is to let the Zalarians claim a weapon that could destroy both our civilizations, another officer noted. The choice is simple: cooperate or face extinction. Over the following days, as the fleet prepared for the joint mission, Ethan found himself in an unprecedented position. As the only human who had been to the Sanctuary coordinates through Allura's explanations, he was considered a valuable consultant. He worked with Viridian scientists and strategists planning the expedition. The location was in the neutral zone, a region of space claimed by neither faction, but heavily patrolled by the Zalarian Empire. Getting there would require careful coordination between human and Viridian forces. Allura had been busy as well, working with the ship's biotechnicians to safely extract and copy the genetic information her grandmother had hidden in her DNA. It was a complex process involving quantum computers that operated on principles Ethan couldn't begin to understand. We have it, she announced on the fourth day. The complete coordinates. Sanctuary is located in the Terminus system near the galactic rim. That's deep in Zalarian territory, Admiral Threx observed. Which is probably why the architects chose it, Allura replied. The stellar patterns there make it nearly impossible to detect any artificial structures unless you know exactly where to look. Preparations intensified. The Confederation fleet was joined by human vessels, marking the first time in decades that the two species had worked together militarily. The sight of human and Viridian ships flying in formation was historic, though Ethan noticed the careful distances both sides maintained. He was assigned to the Joint Command Ship, a modified Viridian vessel with human technical additions. The bridge was a marvel of integrated technology, with officers from both species working side by side. Translation devices helped bridge the language gap, though many officers had learned each other's languages during the brief preparation period. Captain Rodriguez, the human contingent commander, was a grizzled veteran with prematurely gray hair and the perpetually alert eyes of someone who had seen too much combat. She greeted Ethan with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "So you're the guy who started all this," she said. "Saved an alien princess and potentially changed the course of galactic history. Not a bad day's work." "I was just trying to survive," Ethan replied. "The rest kinda snowballed." The best heroics usually do. The joint fleet numbered 40 ships, 20 from each faction. It was an impressive force, but everyone knew the Zalarians would respond in overwhelming numbers once they detected the incursion. As they prepared to depart, Allura found Ethan in the ship's observation deck. They stood together watching the stars and the other ships in the formation. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also hopeful, I guess. This is the first time our species have worked together in my lifetime. Maybe some good will come of it." "The ironic thing," she said, is that my grandmother always believed humans and Viridians were natural allies. Our species complement each other, human ingenuity and Viridian harmony. She said the war was engineered by those who benefit from division, the Zalarians. Among others, there are always those who profit from conflict. The fleet jumped to hyperspace carrying the hopes of two civilizations. The journey would take 5 days with periodic stops to avoid Zalarian patrol routes. During the transit, Ethan continued working with both human and Viridian teams, helping to plan the approach to Sanctuary. The architects had apparently built their creation inside a binary star system, using the gravitational distortions to hide it from casual detection. The structures would only be visible during specific orbital alignments, and even then would require precise coordinates to find. It's elegant, Dr. Sarah Kim, the human lead xenoarchaeologist, observed during a planning session. Hide something in plain sight in a phenomenon that occurs regularly but is nearly impossible to predict without extensive observation. The architects were master engineers, added Dr. Valen, her Viridian counterpart. Their understanding of quantum mechanics and dimensional folding exceeded anything we've achieved. As they approached the terminus system, tension increased. Long-range sensors detected massive Zalarian fleet movements, though nothing had yet moved toward their destination. The joint fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, using sensor dampening technology to mask their presence. The binary stars were spectacular, a blue giant and a white dwarf, locked in an eternal dance. Between them, space itself seemed twisted, distorted by their competing gravitational fields. Somewhere in that chaos was Sanctuary. Initial scans are inconclusive, reported the sensor operator. The stellar distortions are making it impossible to get clear readings. We'll have to go in blind, Captain Rodriguez decided. Small teams, multiple approaches. If one group is detected, the others might still have a chance. They divided into 4 teams, each consisting of both human and Viridian specialists. Ethan was assigned to Team Alpha with Allura, Dr. Kim, and Dr. Velen. Their ship was a modified scout vessel, fast and maneuverable but lightly armed. As they flew deeper into the system, the gravitational distortions became more pronounced. The pilot, a young Viridian named Joran, fought to maintain stable flight, as space itself seemed to pull them in different directions. There, Allura said suddenly, pointing at the main display, "Those aren't natural formations." The structures were almost invisible, like glass sculptures in space. They appeared to be rings, or tori arranged in a complex 3-dimensional pattern, all orbiting a point of perfect darkness at the system's gravitational center. "That's it," Dr. Kim breathed. "That's Sanctuary." They approached carefully, all sensors recording everything. The structures were massive. Each ring was several kilometers in diameter, and there were dozens of them arranged in patterns that seemed to shift as they watched. The orbit patterns, Dr. Velen observed. They're in perfect harmony with the binary star's gravitational field. The architects used the stars themselves as part of the mechanism. As they drew closer, more details became visible. The rings weren't solid. They were composed of countless smaller structures, each one apparently a complex machine. Energy patterns flowed between them like luminous rivers. "No signs of other ships," the sensor operator reported. "We appear to be the first to arrive." But even as he spoke, alerts began flashing. Multiple hyperspace signatures were appearing throughout the system. The Zalarian Empire had found them. 67 ships and counting. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communicator. They came prepared. The peaceful moment of discovery shattered as the joint fleet prepared for battle. Ethan watched as human and Viridian ships moved into combat formations, their weapons powering up. The Zalarian vessels were larger and more heavily armed, but they were outnumbered. "Our job is to reach Sanctuary's central structure," Allura said firmly. "Whatever happens out here, we have to complete the mission." Their little scout ship darted between larger vessels as the battle erupted around them. Energy beams and missile trails crisscrossed space, creating a deadly light show against the backdrop of the binary stars. A Zalarian destroyer broke from the main engagement, its weapons charging as it bore down on them. Jorn threw their ship into a series of evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible without the gravity distortions to mask their trajectory. Warning shots, Ethan realized. They want us alive. Of course, Allura said grimly. They still need the genetic key from my blood. The destroyer's next shots weren't warnings. Energy beams passed close enough to overload their shields. Jorn pushed the engines to their limits, diving toward the ring structures. Bad news, he announced. I'm reading energy barriers between the rings. We can't just fly through. Then how do we reach the center? Dr. Kim asked. Allura studied the energy patterns flowing between the rings. She pointed to a specific configuration. Every fourth cycle, there's a shimmick in the energy flow. If we can time it perfectly, that's a 20-second window, Jorn calculated. And we only get one chance. The destroyer was closing fast, joined now by 2 fighter craft. Behind them, the main battle raged as human and Viridian ships fought desperately to hold their ground. Now, Allura said. Jorn accelerated directly toward the energy barrier. For a heart-stopping moment, it looked like they would slam into it at full speed. Then the energy flow shifted, creating a gap just large enough for their ship. They shot through immediately, caught by the powerful gravitational field of whatever lay at Sanctuary's center. The rings surrounded them now, their structures clearly visible. They were not just machines, they were art. Each one was unique, covered in inscriptions and patterns that seemed to move with a life of their own. The central structure, Dr. Velan pointed ahead. By the void above, it's beautiful. The center of Sanctuary was a sphere of what looked like liquid starlight. It pulsed gently, and as they approached, Ethan could see that it wasn't solid. It was constructed from the same flowing energy as the rings, but condensed into a more stable form. How do we interface with it? Dr. Kim wondered. Allura held up her hand, showing the genetic tattoo. I think I know. They docked with a structure that extended from the sphere like a crystalline flower. As soon as they stepped aboard, Ethan felt a change in the air, a sense of purpose and intelligence that pressed against his consciousness. The interior was unlike anything he'd imagined. Corridors of living light led through chambers that seemed larger inside than outside. And everywhere, there were the inscription symbols that moved and changed, carrying meaning beyond words. They reached the central chamber, a vast space dominated by a pillar of pure energy that stretched from floor to ceiling. Around it, control surfaces that looked more grown than built waited for their touch. Allura approached the central pillar slowly. The patterns on her palm began to glow in response. I can feel it, she whispered. It's trying to communicate. She placed her hand against the pillar's base. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded outward, filling the chamber with images and sensations. For a moment, Ethan felt the consciousness of the architects touch his mind. They saw the history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of civilizations, the endless cycle of war and peace, creation and destruction. The sanctuary wasn't just a weapon, they realized. It was a repository of knowledge, a gift left by beings who had transcended physical existence. And it was a choice. The visions faded, leaving them in a chamber now filled with soft, welcoming light. Floating before them was an interface that somehow combined the best of human Viridian and architect technology. The choice is ours, Allura said, her voice filled with wonder. We can use Sanctuary's power to end this war, but not through force. It offers us the ability to establish a permanent communication link between our consciousness, all 3 species. True understanding beyond words or translation barriers. But Ethan sensed there was more. But accepting this link means giving up our independence. We would become, in essence, a single galactic civilization. Some would call it assimilation. Before they could discuss it further, explosions rocked the structure. The Zalarians had found a way through the barriers. They're using brute force, Dr. Kim observed, checking her instruments. overloading the energy barriers with massive power output. "We have to act," Dr. Valan urged. Once the Zolarians reached this chamber, Allura looked at Ethan. "What do you think?" "You saved my life," started this chain of events. "The choice should be yours too." Ethan considered what they'd seen. War and destruction stretching across millennia. His own experiences as a slave, the courage Allura had shown in the arena, the cooperation between humans and Viridians in the face of a common threat. "I think," he said slowly, "that understanding each other is the only way to truly win." Allura smiled and placed her hands on the interface. The chamber filled with harmonious energy as Sanctuary began to activate its true function. In space around them, the ring structures began to sing, actually producing sound waves that propagated through subspace. The song reached every ship in the system, human, Viridian, and Zolarian alike. But it was more than sound. It carried meaning, emotion, understanding. For the first time, the three species could truly comprehend each other's thoughts and feelings. The change was dramatic. Zolarian ships stopped firing as their crews experienced the terror and desperation that had driven humans and Viridians to cooperate. Human and Viridian forces felt the pride and fear that had motivated Zolarian expansion. Suddenly, concepts like enemy and alien became meaningless. They were all just beings trying to survive and protect what they loved. The fighting stopped. Ship by ship, crews contacted each other using the new understanding Sanctuary provided. Apologies were exchanged, explanations were given, plans were made. In the months that followed, the three civilizations began the complex process of true integration. It wasn't easy. There were those in all three societies who preferred the old ways of conflict and suspicion. But Sanctuary provided a foundation of understanding that made cooperation possible. Ethan found himself appointed as a cultural liaison, helping to bridge the gaps between species. Allura worked to establish new governmental structures that represented all three civilizations fairly. The Zolarian emperor, faced with the reality of his people's desire for peace, abdicated in favor of a council system. The war that had lasted for centuries ended not with conquest, but with understanding. Trade agreements replaced blockades. Cultural exchanges replaced battles. Joint scientific ventures replaced weapons programs. Sanctuary became the center of the new galactic civilization, its rings now serving as a university and meeting place where beings from all three species could learn from each other and from the knowledge the architects had left behind. And in a quiet ceremony attended by representatives from human Viridian and Zolarian worlds, Princess Allura Viridian married Ethan Myers, former slave, former soldier, current hero. Their wedding was broadcast across the galaxy, a symbol of what was possible when beings chose understanding over hatred. During their reception, as beings of three species mingled and celebrated together, Allura found Ethan watching the stars through a great transparent wall. "Regrets?" she asked, joining him. He thought of the arena where this had all started, of the moment when he'd chosen to act rather than watch injustice occur. "Not one," he said. "Well, maybe I regret the part about nearly getting us killed several times." She laughed, the sound still carrying that crystal chime quality that had attracted him from the beginning. The best adventures usually include at least some risk of death. They stood together watching the ships of their new unified civilization travel between the stars. The future was uncertain, unity was fragile, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in their lifetimes, war was not inevitable. Ethan reflected on how a single moment of conscience choosing to save one person when he could have stayed safe had changed everything. The old saying proved true. Sometimes great things did have small beginnings. Sometimes one person's courage really could save not just a life, but an entire universe. As if reading his thoughts, Allura squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me that humans could be more than their reputation suggested." "Thank you," he replied, "for showing me that some things are worth risking everything for." Above them, the stars shone with the promise of infinite possibilities, and three civilizations faced their future together bound not by conquest, but by choice. The war was over. Understanding had won. And it had all begun with one human who couldn't stand to watch a quartering.